103, 5 Lincoln 102, Lincoln 103 and 102.
Responding to 401 parking structure, section 1 boy.
Henry 8, Henry 9. Respond to gate 437 Bravo for your dignitary detail. 3K 911 unattended 400 lower level near carousel 4 black bag. GTA in progress 401 parking structure section 4 boy.
Responding to 401 parking structure, section 1 boy.
415 passenger onboard aircraft.
Control 2 Franklin en route.
484 suspect is female, Hispanic, 28 years of age, blue jeans, no further.
Control 5 Frank 401 is en route.
Nine security officers shot in less than 7 days. 2 security officers murdered in less than 7 days. More than 40 attacks on security officers in less than 7 days. Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Private Officer Beat Radio. I'm your host, Rick McCann, founder and CEO of Private Officer International. And I got to tell you today, right now, this morning, this very moment, I am disgusted with the security industry from coast to coast, north to east to west to south, every direction that you can look at, every direction you can look in, every state, every single city, town, village, or borough in this country has seen an uptick, and not just an uptick, but a huge increase of attacks, assaults, injuries, and murders of security officers. This year, unprecedented in other years, we've seen security officers attacked, injured, and killed in small town USA and big city metropolitan areas. It doesn't matter where, it doesn't even matter when, day or night, afternoon or early morning. It doesn't matter the type of the environment, apartment, nightclub, big box store, special event, patrol service. It doesn't matter anymore if it's an armed or unarmed site. Officers are being attacked. And nationwide, as we see this continue to grow, and as we talk to security company owners across the country about this huge situation of violence against private security officers, I am disgusted, to be honest with you, in the response that we're getting from large, medium, and small security company owners. I told you just a few weeks ago, maybe even last week, about a security company in Iowa. The owner telling me he believes less than 2% of security officers nationwide could fight their way out of a wet paper bag. He explicitly said that he doesn't believe that the majority of security officers could defend themselves, let alone defend their clients. This is an owner of a security company, and when we talked back and forth about the increased violence right there in his own city in Iowa, Des Moines, Iowa, right there on his own accounts, you know what his response was? That part of the business we expected. What can we do? Less than 2% of security officers can defend themselves. That's not what I see. That's not what I believe. Of course, we have our continuing problems in this industry. Of course, we're under training, under preparing our security staff. Of course, that's still going on. And companies, just like this one in Iowa, is acting as a staffing firm and not as a protection company or agency. And that's part of the problem. Observe and report? Are you kidding me? As I've said over and over and over again, this is something that was made up by the insurance companies, telling security providers not to go hands-on, not to arm their security personnel, not to train their security personnel, because if they did, they'd have to defend every move they made. It's better not to have security, is actually what the insurance companies believe and what attorneys are telling their clients. Of course, I understand their philosophy. I understand their feeling, because they're not preparing their security staff to adequately respond proactively to the crimes on their property, the robberies, the thefts, the shootings. They don't prepare them, and they feel like, well, if we don't prepare them, then they're not going to get involved. But that's not how it is. If you're at a hotel and you're standing in the lobby and two people are fighting, are you just going to watch them? Are you just going to, film them? Are you going to call 911? Well, if that's the case, why hire security? Two people fighting, you're going to at least try to break it up. Call the police. Try to intervene. Try to de-escalate. Try to do something to stop the attack. I don't expect, and I don't believe anybody expects, a security officer who's unarmed to take on an armed attacker. Get to safety. Call 911. Give them the most details that you can. Give them description, license tag, anything else. Yeah, of course, there's going to be some unarmed security personnel that are going to intervene in that armed attack. They're going to try and do something to prevent it, to stop it, to prevent others from being injured or killed. That's just who they are. But if you're not one of those, that's okay. You're unarmed. Take cover. Get a description. Call police. Do something more than observe. Do something more than observe. 9 security officers injured this week. And as far as we know, at least 3 were armed. Nationwide, we're only getting tidbits of information of what's really happening in the security community across our country. Newspapers and TV stations don't highlight the everyday stories. They only want the headlines, the leading stories, the shockers. Oh, so-and-so, he used excessive force. Oh, a white officer attacked another black man and injured him. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Those are the headlines they're looking for today. So we are only really, truly getting what we feel like probably about 12 to 15% of the real news that's happening in the security industry across the country. Although we do have some of our members and followers who participate in exchange of news. They'll send us news tips. We appreciate those folks. If you want to send us news tips, be sure to send them to helpdesk@privateofficer.com, helpdesk@privateofficer.com. If you want to get news, breaking news in your mailbox, officer down reports, training information, again, sign up today. It's free. Send an email to helpdesk@privateofficer.com or go to our website, privateofficer.org, and sign up today. Those are free. I know some people, they think they get too many. If 2 or 3 newsletters or alerts are too many a week, you're probably right. It's not for you. Don't sign up. We don't overburden. We don't fill email boxes up with junk. We only send out what's necessary. If you're interested in the real breaking news, the Officer Down reports, our bi-weekly newsletters, occasional training discounts and information, then sign up, privateofficer.org. Our industry is changing drastically. Someone contacted me this past week and asked about the evolution of security. Well, I talk about that topic all the time. I try to explain people from my perspective, having been in this since I was 17, what's happening in our industry. Private security today is exactly where law enforcement was in the early 70s and 80s. They were just progressing at that time, and the security industry is now progressing from an observe and report to being proactive and responding. I just saw an article in a local newspaper out of Tennessee where a large company talking about how he's getting more clients who are asking for proactive security patrols. If you see something, could you try and stop it? If you see a trespasser, could you tell them get off the property? If you see a theft or a burglary, could you try and detain them until police could get there? Proactive, progressive security is happening whether security company owners want to acknowledge it or not. If you have a security officer on patrol and he's responding to a call on the property that you've been contracted on, and he gets there and he sees a crime in progress, more than likely it's just natural to get out and get involved, find out what's happening, challenge a suspect. This industry that we're in is changing. 9 security officers shot, less than 7 days, 2 dead. Doesn't that speak volumes about what's happening? We're not the night watchmen of the 60s and 70s. We preach about this all the time, and yet many companies don't want to acknowledge. Many companies don't want to speak the truth. They want to hide it, shuffle it around, hide it under the rug, sweep it under the rug, make believe it's not there. That's not going to help things. That's not going to change things. That's not going to make things better. And it's definitely not going to prevent our employees from being shot and killed. Besides all of the shootings, there were a number of security officers hit by a vehicle this week. In fact, I think it's one of the weeks in the last few years that we've had the most security officers hit by a vehicle. We've had several stabbed this week, and on and on and on. Look around your own community. Look around in your state. Look at the news that's happening. They're broadcasting these injuries, these attacks, these shootings of security personnel. Are you just ignoring it? Are you just blind to it? Are you just not wanting to think about it? Because if you don't think about it, maybe it won't happen to you. But that's not how life works. This week, we've got a lot to talk about. And one of those things is trespassing. One of those things is civil unrest. And in our topic this week, we were going to cover the second half of how to become a police officer, but we've changed it up. We're going to do that next week. This week, we want to talk about trespassing laws since we're in the middle of the holidays. And, well, for the last, 9 years since the riots in St. Louis and other areas, we've seen civil unrest this time of year at shopping malls, in big box stores, on private property. Often it's mishandled, incorrectly handled by security. Oftentimes protesters are just overwhelming retailers during the Christmas shopping season. So we want to talk a little bit about what is trespassing, what isn't trespassing, how to enforce trespassing, and how to get law enforcement involved sooner than later, because as things continue to blow up, as that fire continues to really develop and get out of control, security, one or two officers are going to be overcome and not able to defend themselves. So getting a law enforcement officer involved is a key thing that you can do to help prevent the place from being overrun. So we're going to talk about that later on in the second half of the Private Officer Beat Radio. Well, you can tell I'm all wound up this week. Got a lot to talk about. Coming right back. Got a quick message. And when we come back, we got a lot of news, like always, and we've got a lot of things happening. We want to talk about the Frontline Protector, how you can get involved, and how we're changing up how POI, Private Officer International, does business, and what this means for you. Coming right back after these messages. Hey everyone, you're listening to the voice of the Frontline Protector right here on the Private Officer Radio Network. Now don't go away, because we are coming right back when we've got a whole lot more right here on the Private Officer Beat Radio.
Hi, everyone. Did you know that one organ donor can save up to 8 lives? The need for organ donors now is greater than ever. 120,000 people right now in the U.S. are waiting for an organ transplant. 95% of Americans support organ donation, but only a little over half are registered. My charity, Health Corps, has teamed up with Donate Life and Organize.org to save up to 500,000 lives by getting 62,500 folks to register as organ donors. If you're not registered, click the Register Now link to stand up and be counted. And when you're done, go on Facebook and tell us your story and add my hashtag organs will. For example, you might say, hashtag organs will make a difference. I'm an organ donor. Are you?
Are you shopping around for armed or unarmed security training, CPR or first aid training, lethal or non-lethal training in and around the greater Metro Charlotte area? Do you want to be SLED certified so that you can maybe start a new career or make some part-time income? Then check out Premier Training Academy, Charlotte, North Carolina's leading academy for all things training. 704-806-4933. Ask for John. Premier Training. We're here to train you so that you don't make mistakes. Premier Training Academy, Metro Charlotte's premier training service. 704-806-4933. Are you looking for protective wear, body armor, / protective clothing? Are you a correction officer, a law enforcement officer, a private security officer? Do you need good body armor? Of course you do. No doubt about it. I just told you in segment 1 about how dangerous it is out there, and the violence is increasing, and that is a fact. Well, our friends over at Body Armor USA has exactly what you need to keep yourself safe when you're working on the streets, so that you can go back home to be with your family. Body Armor USA, check them out online. Call them today. Body Armor USA, we've got what it takes to protect you. BodyArmorUSA.com. Our friends there will take good care of you. Driving down the road about a week now ago, I happened to notice in one of the lanes over to my left a couple of guys drag racing. And as I'm traveling down the interstate, I could see where these two were pretty serious about what they were doing. And although it didn't get to the extremes where they started cutting each other off or, pulling weapons, they were flipping each other off. And they were mouthing. I could see them trying to talk back and forth as one pulled ahead of the other. And, it's not really uncommon for aggression these days. It's not uncommon to see road rage these days. It's not uncommon to see a customer inside a grocery store or a big box store upset, yelling at employees of the store. In fact, I'm running into it more times than not. It's the world that we are living in today. And so I have decided to begin providing free training, personal safety, use of force, and protecting of oneself, and firearms training to a number of groups. And starting in January, we will provide instructor-level training to individuals who are interested to be able to provide this service in your neck of the woods. And if you're interested, just call or send us an email at helpdesk@privateofficer.com. helpdesk@privateofficer.com. We want to help protect our community. We want our community to understand how they can be safe in their environment, whether it's at work or driving through the city or going shopping or being out with their family. In the last maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I've read a half a dozen articles where armed citizens have come to the rescue. In fact, a couple of days ago, an armed citizen stopped an armed robbery at a restaurant and got into a gun battle with the suspect. And had he not been there, it might have been the employees going to the hospital instead of the armed robbery suspect. I have had and been around firearms all my life. Gone in the military young, been involved in law enforcement and security 40 plus years. Firearms is a tool, is part of the business, and I've always treated it as such. I'm not a, quote, gun enthusiast. I don't buy 150 guns and put them in some safe or closet or lock away just to say I have them. And if you do, that's fine. If you have that extra money, which it's a very expensive, thing to do, but if you got the money, great for you. But for me, firearms has always been just another tool in the toolbox. And, for a while, I was not always carrying, and sometimes I would go places and wish I had. So in recent months, all of this year for sure, and part of last year, I just had made a decision after seeing all of these armed confrontations going on across the country. I just decided to carry 99% of the time. There's a few places, even as a law enforcement officer, you can't, carry into that building or that location. And to be honest with you, some of those retailers and restaurants I don't go into. So, but I said all of that to say this. I feel it's very, very important these days to train people to have situational awareness, almost to the level of a law enforcement or security officer, to train them in some simple defensive tactics so that they can protect themselves and their family. They don't have to be, black belt. I'm not talking about that. It's great if they want to do that. That's fine. But I want to train them in how to not only have good situational awareness, but how to make several tactical moves to defend themselves. And it can be done with, the simplest of things. A pencil, a pen, a fork, even if they're not armed, they're still armed if there's something around them. We can turn almost anything into a weapon, a fire extinguisher. And so I want to train people to know the law. I see all the time, weekly, convenience store clerks and managers and owners being arrested for murder and aggravated assault because they have fired upon a shoplifter or someone who attempted to steal from their store, and they're now charged with these heinous crimes that, they don't have a criminal record, never been involved in any negative contact with law enforcement, and now all of a sudden they're on the headlines and in the newspapers, and they're facing some serious time in prison. So I want to teach people, what the law is, situational awareness, some tactics on defending themselves and their family, and some gun safety and tactics for defense. I know that the NRA and several other organizations do this, but they don't do it as a package the way that I want to. And I'm very committed about this. And, if you're interested to become an instructor, send an email to helpdesk@privateofficer.com. All right, for a number of weeks now, we have been talking about Frontline Protector TV. And I'm really excited working with several production companies right now, editing and a production company, to get this off the ground. It is a lot of work. It's very expensive. But hopefully we'll be able to portray private security and law enforcement in a different light than they are today. They're not the bad guys. They're the good guys. Of course, there's always going to be a couple of bad apples, but we're not going to worry about them, and we're not going to talk about them. We're not even going to acknowledge them. The frontline protectors, we're going to highlight those private and public officers who put their life on the line, literally, every day in every community across our country to protect their community and our nation. And I want to highlight them in a way that they've never been highlighted before. And we've got some great stories for the first pilot that we're going to be coming out with, and also for the first season. So we're already in production, and we hope to wrap this up and have this out by early spring, the pilot possibly the first of the year. If you want to sponsor it, you can contact who else? Helpdesk at privateofficer.com. Helpdesk at privateofficer.com. If you want to be a sponsor, we have a high volume of followers on our social media. I know we're going to turn them into viewers of our web series. I know we're going to have a large number of our social media, our members, our sponsors, followers, all engaged in this new web series. The other show that we're working on as part of our new web series is Gone But Not Forgotten. We're going to be taking a look at police and security officers who have gone missing. on duty and off duty, as well as the unsolved deaths of numerous security and police officers. Just read one a few days ago. This happened in Dayton, Ohio, 20 years ago. It's still an unsolved murder of a police officer. And we're gonna keep their memory, we're gonna keep their unsolved murder or missing case in the public's eye. If you need more information, help desk at privateofficer.com. If you want to sponsor it, it's going to work similar to PBS. If you ever watch PBS, you know, any of their shows on PBS is sponsored. And for a certain amount of fee, you'll get your name, your company name, advertised on those shows, and you're going to have a lot of hits. You're going to have a lot of response, I can assure you. Help desk at privateofficer.com. Wow, what else do we have? It's been a busy couple of weeks. We've got a lot happening. We're working on really completing the 2019 year. We got a lot to do before that's over with, and then rolling right into 2020. When we come back from this set of messages, I do want to talk a little bit more about what's to expect for 2020. We've got several new member-only products that we're going to be introducing. We've got several new, I don't want to say employment. Well, we do have employment opportunities. We have ownership opportunities, and we have investor opportunities. So we'll talk to you about that when we come back from these messages. You're listening to the Private Officer Beat Radio, a production of Private Officer International. Be right back.
From coast to coast, cops are cracking down on seatbelt violations. Buckle up day and night or expect a ticket. It doesn't matter who you are or where you live, they'll be on the lookout. Cops write tickets to save lives. Click it for ticket.
Well, no pigtails anymore.
Check, please.
David, you okay to drive?
Yeah, I only had a couple drinks. I'm fine.
Come on.
Keys can be a weapon. A few drinks can make you a killer.
At Armor College, a public safety institute, we train those who help others. Paramedics and emergency medical technicians, firefighters, police officers, law enforcement, private security, bail enforcement, and those on the front line. Check us out today at armorcollege.org. ARMOUR college.org. We'll even bring the school to you. Armor College, a public safety institute. We're here at the news desk this morning with a lot of news to share with you, as we always do every week. If you're interested in getting that news in your email box, be one of the first to know what's happening in your industry, just go to our website at privateofficer.org. privateofficer.org. Sign up today. It's free. You're going to get those newsletters, breaking news, officer down reports, and a whole lot more right there in your new news box. Some tragic information today that we've been sitting here talking about. As of today, 110 law enforcement officers have been killed in the line of duty this year. 110, and 93 private security officers have been killed in the line of duty this year so far, and 6 private police officers, sworn private law enforcement, have been killed, all in the service of others. They've given their life in the service of others. No greater love hath any man, the Bible says. And people say all the time, well, you know what? There's other more dangerous businesses out there, other more dangerous jobs that you can have. Well, that's true, but those people are not going into it knowing that they're going to have to lay down their life at some point for others. They do get killed on the job, but most of the time it's by a tragic accident, by hazards, by things that they don't control. They didn't go to work thinking they were going to be killed, but here in the field of law enforcement and security, we know every day that we put on a uniform, a badge, and go out to help to protect others, that it could be the final day for us. We told you earlier at the top of the radio program, this week at least 9 security officers shot in 7 days. We know 2 are dead. Officers in Mississippi, Arizona, North Carolina, New York, Missouri, among those shot, including 2 at one time at a hotel in Phoenix, Arizona. Violence is up. Trust me, the security industry is dangerous, even though employers, business owners don't want you to know. In San Diego, community protest outside several nightclubs after protesters say excessive force was used by club security. San Diego police was called to the Backyard Kitchen and Tap in Pacific Beach after a dozen or more protesters gathered and was blocking the sidewalk. Unknown if any arrests were made there. In Chico, California, an arrest was made of a Chico man after he fought with security and threatened him. According to law enforcement, Jeremy Underwood, 34, is facing assault and other charges. Tragically, this week, coming out of Virginia Beach Police and NCIS, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, is investigating the death of a naval security officer who was on duty. A civilian drove his vehicle and crashed it into a base security vehicle at the Joint Expeditionary Base Little Creek, Fort Story, there in Virginia Beach. And unfortunately, the master at arms, the military naval security person, was killed. An investigation is underway. The person who was driving that vehicle has been hospitalized and could face some very serious charges. In Knightdale, North Carolina, this past week, police there say a suspicious person sitting naked as a jaybird in the parking lot of Kohl's was arrested. A report of a suspicious man in the shopping center and then sitting naked in the parking lot. Police said he smelled of marijuana. He was charged with indecent exposure, marijuana possession, and resisting arrest. These are the type of calls and situations that loss prevention is now getting into. Loss prevention has always been more involved in apprehensions of shoplifters and employees and investigating fraud, but now they're also getting involved in a whole array of crime happening on their property. DeKalb, Georgia police say 2 attempted kidnappings did occur, one at a shopping center and one at a hospital. Emory Healthcare has said in a statement that a person was attempting to kidnap and carjack an employee in the North Decatur Square, and police do not at this time have any suspects. A man was wounded in a shooting at the Syracuse Mall. Mall security say panic immediately began spreading as a shot was fired. A person was hit. Police quickly surrounded the mall. The 20-year-old had 3 gunshots to the leg. He is expected to survive, and that investigation is underway. A Kansas City, Missouri security officer was shot over the weekend at a gas station. The security officer on duty at about 11:50 p.m. A man came in the Express Mart Shell store and without saying a word began shooting, hitting the security officer and a customer. Both are in critical condition. A Milwaukee man threatened to kill a security officer and tried to run over him with his vehicle. Police said Hermelio Hernandez Barras, 26, has been arrested on 4 counts of reckless endangering safety, use of a dangerous weapon, assault with a dangerous weapon in this situation. 3 suspects have been arrested in a theft of $74,000 worth of products from Target in Dover, Delaware. Police say the New York man was charged with felony theft. All 3 were spotted in the parking lot of the Target store, continuously bringing out merchandise, and they were taken into custody when police arrived. A man in Maine, believe it or not, was killed by a homemade security device that he accidentally triggered. It fired a handgun that he had set up to secure his property and killed him. We've seen this a number of times. It's not the best type of security system to have. In Lexington, Kentucky, police there took a man into custody who had wrestled with a Macy's security agent and tried to flee the store with merchandise. He was placed under arrest and charged with robbery. 5 teens in Fremont, California arrested now for robbing a Target store there on Thanksgiving night. The 5 teens also in a scuffle with store security. Police there said that they fled, but police were able to take them into custody. Those 2 security officers I just told you about in Phoenix, Arizona, both shot. One is in good condition. One has been released with non-life-threatening injuries. A drive-by shooting at the Super 8. Police don't have anyone in custody. Daytona Beach, Florida, a husband walked into the Daytona Health Rehabilitation Center and shot and killed his wife and then committed suicide. The facility said this was unexpected. The man had visited his wife several times. There were no incidents. These situations are on the rise. Every year we report a dozen or more of these incidents. In Dayton, Ohio, police remember Officer Kevin Brame, who was gunned down 20 years ago. This murder is a cold case, and police are actively investigating it. They don't have any leads. In Batavia, a Batavia high school student, now listen to this, faces charges of possessing explosive materials. Police got a tip that the juvenile had explosive materials and had planned on using it possibly at the Batavia High School. Police searched the home, confiscated the explosive components. He's currently held without bond at the Kane County Juvenile Justice System. A Sonny Plattsburgh University police officer has received an award. He did a very heroic thing when he jumped into a river last November after being told that somebody was in the water needing help. And luckily for both of them, it worked out. The water was at freezing temperatures. A man had evidently fallen into the water near the university. The police officer immediately, without second thoughts, jumped in and rescued the man. And this is what police officers do. And across the country, we see it over and over, and it's just very heroic. An Indiana man has been sentenced for an armored car robbery in Hammond, Indiana. Police sentenced 24-year-old Riley Jackson to 42 months in prison for an armored truck robbery that occurred earlier in the year. The security officers were not injured. In Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, a man there did try to injure security. Devontae Wedderburn, 22, has been arrested at the Wilkes-Barre General Hospital after assaulting security during a disturbance there. Security was able to detain him, and he was taken into custody. Security guards were also maced during a Bloomingdale's robbery in New York. This happened around 3 p.m. as they stole a large quantity of Louis Vuitton purses and other Louis Vuitton, and also assaulted the security officers on the way out the door. Lots and lots and lots of news always happening across the country. One more story to share with you. In Atlanta, Georgia, security and the Atlanta Police Department worked together after a man had come into the Grady Memorial Hospital disguised as a janitor for several times and stole items, hiding them in a cleaning car. Surveillance video did pick up the man's face. Police then used other investigative tools to determine who that man was and made an arrest on several charges of burglary. Once again, if you want news in your mailbox, all that you have to do is go to our website, privateofficer.org, privateofficer.org. Sign up today. They're free. Get newsletters, breaking news, officer down reports, and a whole lot more. Hey, we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we've got a lot more to talk about. And today we're talking about trespassing, what it really is, how to enforce it, how to stop it, nip it in the bud, as they say, before it gets out of hand, especially during this time of year when protesters take advantage of the Christmas shoppers out at the big box stores and the malls and public spaces. We'll be right back. We want to talk about this. It's very important. It's also the time of year when officers get seriously injured, and we want to help you prevent that. We're coming right back here on the Private Officer Beat Radio.
Human trafficking is slavery.
And it happens all over America.
Any child, any woman, any man could potentially become a victim of human trafficking.
I am a victim of labor trafficking.
I was a victim of child sex trafficking, but now I own my body.
Human trafficking is any kind of forced labor.
It can happen to anybody.
I am a mother.
I am an author.
I am a son.
I'm an advocate.
I am an educator.
I'm a sister.
I am a brother.
I'm so much more than what happened to me.
I am strong.
I am brave.
I am outspoken.
I am compassionate.
I am a survivor.
I'm a survivor.
I am a survivor.
I am a survivor.
I am a survivor.
I am a survivor of human trafficking.
Slow down.
Slow down and move over.
And move over. When you see lights,
Best. Or reflectors.
please give us some room. Slow down and move over. When you need us,
We've got your back.
You have ours.
You got our back?
you got ours. You got our back. Please slow down.
And move over.
Trespassing. Over the years, we've done a lot of training, and we still do, for individuals and companies on this very misinterpreted and miscued criminal act that the public frequently interprets for their own benefit. Through the years, we've seen more and more people committing acts of trespassing at will, knowingly, with complete disregard for the owners of the property, being completely disrespectful, being completely destructive at times, and yet it's not prosecuted the way that it should be. Several times in recent years, during this time of the year, we have done trainings, both on the radio show as well as live and in person, on this crime. Although it's a misdemeanor in all states, it can be elevated to the top of the misdemeanor list. In some states, there's a Class A misdemeanor, a Class B misdemeanor. It all carries different penalties. And during this time of year, people, especially those protesting one thing or the other, disregard this law, enter property after being told to leave, refuse to leave, create disorder. They're disruptive, aggressive, and even violent. How many times in the last 6 or 7 years have you seen crowds, everyone from Black Lives Matter to Earth protesters, storming malls and retailers and other private properties because they misinterpret the law? Many people, unfortunately, still believe that because a business is open or because the word public is used to address the type of building. For instance, many people believe the courthouse is a public building. Yes, it is a public building as such, supported through taxes. And by the way, again, that's something that's misinterpreted. Taxes are collected from property taxes, property owners, whether that be commercial or residential. Taxes to support police, fire, construction of schools does not come from your candy bar or from your six-pack of beer. Those sales tax go elsewhere. People believe that the public library, because it says public, means they can go in anytime they want. They can't be asked to leave. They can't be forced to leave. If they don't leave, they don't believe they can be arrested because it's a public building, a public park. Wrong. They can, and they will be arrested if they disobey the law. When asked. In this training segment, we're going to be talking essentially about private property. And there's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of half-truths, and a lot of confusion over what really is private property. People hear the term public housing, public library, public park, and they naturally assume that this means that it's public land, that it's open to the public at any time, under any condition. And that simply is not true. There's also a lot of misinformation and informed public when it comes to private property on Section 8 low-income housing complexes, HOAs, apartment complexes, retail stores, and so on and so forth. So in this class, we want to give you the proper information that you're going to be able to use every day in the duties and responsibilities that you have either as a public or private officer. An easy way to understand and really solve this issue is first by establishing and understanding that the property is owned by a company or an individual and not the public at large. Let me give you an example right off the bat. You own a home or rent an apartment and you're throwing a barbecue. You invite about 20 of your friends and family and some of their friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, come along. Now everything is copacetic and going quite well. Everyone's enjoying the barbecue, but you find that one of the invitees is inside your residence and smoking a cigarette. Now you've told everyone prior to the barbecue, at the time of the invitation, in fact, that there is no smoking on the premises, either in the yard or the home, because you and your children are allergic to cigarette smoke. But here you've walked into the home and you have found one of the guests smoking inside. You ask if they put the cigarette out and leave the house and go back outside. They tell you they will in a moment. You ask them again, please put the cigarette out, this is my home, and go outside. They don't respond quickly enough, or they don't respond in the right manner. And they give you a hard time about it. At that point, they're no longer an invited guest. There's someone who has broken the rules, someone who has broken what you've asked them not to do, broken your trust, and you've asked them now to leave the property. At that point, they're no longer an invited guest, they become a trespasser. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about the details of what constitutes a true trespasser and what are the enforcement or laws involved and what can be done to get them off the property. Any property, whether it's owned by an individual or corporation or the city, such as the public school, a high school, a junior high, the public library, so on and so forth, is private property. Everything falls under one of four different types of private property. And really that is something that the public misconstrues because they believe that as long as they have access to the property, as long as they've been invited, or it's a retail space, a shopping mall, or a public garage, a public building, a public facility, they have a right to be there. But that, as you will soon find out, is not true. It's not the case, and it's not the law. When you are invited to a property, the law and the language of the law in most states is going to be the same when defining what property is and is not. People often really do equate private property with something that is material, for instance, like a piece of land. People think that it's not private property unless it's posted. It's not private property unless it says that it is, and that isn't true at all. Private property is often described in legal terms as the exclusive right of individuals to exclude others from the use or benefit of the property, the material, or the resources therein. Individual rights to property include the right to possess, to use, to manage, to derive income from it, to secure against misappropriation, and it gives them a right also to bequest it in part or whole to others. That means to give it, to will it to others. That describes what private property is. An individual or a company or a group of persons have the direct and sole ownership or custodial care of that property. They may not be the owner if it's a government building or belongs to the municipal or city county government, but they are the caretaker, they are the manager, they are the director. Property just isn't one thing or the other. Property can be a car, it can be jewelry, it can be land, it can be a complex, it can be a golf course, but it all boils down to the right of the owner having the sole and direct control and care and ownership to do what they want basically with that property. And that's how it is with when we're dealing with land or buildings, whether it be owned by an individual or a corporation or the government. Let me say this. We do pay taxes. We pay city taxes. In some places we pay county taxes, we pay state taxes, and so forth. We may pay individual taxes, we may pay business taxes, we may pay both. And some of those funds do ultimately go to the building of public schools, public libraries, public city halls, town halls, and entities for the good of the use of the overall public. And that's where many get that really confused. They believe because their tax dollars may or may not go to the building or go to the purchase of the land or the upkeep of the property, that they have the right to come and go and do as they please because they essentially pay for it. You probably have heard people say that. You probably have heard people say, I pay your salary. Well, they don't really, because taxes go to a general fund. Ultimately, some of it may be trickled down to the budget to include payroll. It may be trickled down to include property upkeep or property management. But when a public entity, such as the city government or the county government or the village, when they construct a school, when they construct a new town hall, a police department, a fire department, it is called public use property. For the good of the general public, for the good of the community, it is being set aside. The park is being built for the good of our community, not for any one individual. And as long as the community treats the property with respect, use it during the hours specified, doesn't destroy it, doesn't commit any crimes, they are invited guests to the property. All of that changes, as you're going to see, with all of these four different categories of property. So let's talk about this for a minute. The four categories of property. We often see people who are involved in problems or situations at shopping malls, amusement parks, things of that nature. They get into a little trouble, they may disobey the policy, they may become drunk, whatever, and they're asked to leave, and they think that they don't have to leave because it's open to the public. This is called an open access type of property. Parks, restaurants, concert venues, these are all examples of private property that allow public access during specific dates and times under certain conditions, as long as the property is used essentially for the purpose that it's meant to be, and the user abides by all the rules and regulations as specified, that open access property, they are considered, the user is considered an invitee. When we open the mall at 10 a.m. and we unlock those doors, we're inviting people to come in and use the property for what it's meant to be used for: shopping, eating, socializing in an orderly fashion without any destruction, without causing any disorderly situations, without a big to-do, as long as they're not committing any crimes or violating any of our rules and regulations, then it's a public access open area. Not all area of the mall or the hospital or the facility that the invited guest is on or in may or may not be available to all the users. So for instance, let's talk again about the shopping mall. Even though the mall essentially is open to the general public during a specific time and under a specific condition, that doesn't mean that all of the administrative offices, all of the back hallways, all of the storage areas, all of the parking areas, all of the supply rooms is open to the general public. All of that is private property 100%. No access. Oftentimes, those areas will be posted employees only. Just because you're invited in to a certain area, and we're going to talk about this in the next segment, but the property, you're an invited guest on that property while you follow the conditions. And you essentially have a contract with the property to abide by those rules and regulations and to use the property as it's meant to be used and not to create any disturbances. On an open access property, let's say a concert venue, a person has become intoxicated or caused a disturbance or attempted a theft or is found in possession of narcotics or is becoming unruly, any of those would be conditions to eject that person off the property. Concert goers who have paid $200 to attend the concert can be ejected and trespassed off the property as quick as some homeless, intoxicated person who wanders in. The property is private. The function is public. The person has been invited in to attend the concert as long as they paid for the ticket and conducted themselves in an orderly fashion. But the moment that all of that changes, the moment that the person or persons become disorderly, intoxicated, create a public hazard, a public disturbance, then certainly the landowner or the land manager or agent, and that agent could be a security officer, would then have a right to escort them off the property and issue a trespass. And we'll talk about that trespass coming up in a later segment. The next area of property that we deal with frequently is called a limited use. We talked about open access. Well, this is a limited use. And some of those areas of limited use, or an example of it, would be like a doctor's office. You come to a doctor's office and you have come there for a specific reason, for a medical condition. It may be a dentist's office and you've come to have a tooth extracted. You have access to the common areas. That would be the waiting room, maybe a rest room. You have access to a medical suite or medical holding area where the doctor will evaluate you, may do an exam, medical procedure. Those are your limits within that doctor's office. It doesn't mean that you can wander through the halls and check out what he has in his office. It doesn't mean you can wander the halls and check out what kind of equipment is in one of the medical suites on the other side of the building. It doesn't mean you can walk into any area other than the common areas and the procedure area where you're going to be examined. Anything more than that, you're technically trespassing without the permission of the facility. Same thing for a school or a commercial office building or a hospital. Many times people will come into a hospital through the emergency room. They'll come in ambulatory, walk in through the ER, and while they're waiting, because the waiting can be excessive sometimes, they wander off and they start, taking a little visit through the hallways and up and down the floors and whatnot. Sometimes they do it with the intent to commit crimes, theft, sexual assault, other things like that. The moment that they leave the general area in which they have a right to be, such as the emergency room, the minute that they go up to the third floor, the rooftop, the stock room, the administrative offices, they are technically trespassing, and they can be arrested at that point. All of those areas would be restricted and off duty, off limit to that person, and it would be the duty of the security officer or manager or administrator to confront them and give them that verbal notice and decide whether or not to press any further charges. In a limited use area, we have the right to use that common area during normal hours, normal business. Anything else is restricted. And common sense would tell you that if you're there to get a tooth pulled, that you have no business in the dentist's personal office or in the administrative office or in the supply room. That's not where you're going to have your tooth pulled. That's not where you're going to have the exam. So obviously, you're up to no good. But that's considered a limited use. Those are some of the examples of what a limited use is. It's basically, there may be more to the area, more offices, more space than the little area that you might be in, but you have access or permission to be only in that one little area, that limited space. That's your area that's authorized. Anything beyond that would be a violation of the rules, and you would be possibly ejected or even arrested. Trespassing, that's good stuff. We're going to be continuing on next week in part 2. We're going to wrap it up next week talking about how to enforce trespassing, what the laws are, how to be effective in de-escalating things before they get out of control, and of course how to work well with your local police department so that when you do have these protesters and mass disorderly persons, crowds on the property, that you'll be able to get immediate response and help from your local PD. That's going to do it for us here on the Private Officer Beat Radio. Like always, be safe, be blessed, and we'll talk to you next week right here on the Private Officer Beat Radio.